I never thought moving to a gated community in Scottsdale, Arizona, would turn into a legal nightmare. But here I was, staring at my empty garage where my $50 set of traction mats used to be. The mats were gone, and I knew exactly who took them. My name is Kyle Fredrickson, and I had been living in the Saguaro Heights subdivision for about 8 months. The place looked perfect when I first toured it. Clean streets, manicured lawns, and a sense of order that appealed to my methodical nature as a software engineer. What I did not realize was that our HOA president, Barbara Thompson, took that sense of order to a psychotic extreme. Barbara was exactly what you would picture when someone says the word Karen. Mid-50s, blonde bob haircut with those chunky highlights, always wearing yoga pants despite never actually going to yoga, and perpetually clutching her phone like it was a weapon. She drove a white Lexus SUV and had that look in her eyes that said she considered calling the police a recreational activity. The traction mats in question were not just any mats. I had purchased them specifically for my garage floor because Arizona summers are brutal, and I tracked in monsoon mud during the rainy season. They were high-quality rubber mats with a diamond plate pattern, and I had paid $53 for the set at Home Depot. I kept the receipt because I keep receipts for everything, a habit that was about to save my sanity. It started 3 weeks ago when I got my first violation notice from the HOA. The letter, printed on expensive cardstock with the Saguaro Heights logo embossed at the top, informed me that items visible through my garage door violated Section 7.3 of the Community Guidelines. I read that section about 15 times. It said nothing about traction mats. It mentioned boats, RVs, and commercial vehicles, but nothing about garage floor mats. I decided to attend the next HOA meeting to address this directly. The meetings were held every second Tuesday of the month in the community clubhouse, a building that somehow managed to look both expensive and cheap at the same time. The conference room had that generic corporate feel, complete with uncomfortable chairs and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill. Barbara sat at the head of the table, flanked by 2 other board members. Greg Martinez, who always looked like he would rather be anywhere else, and Donna Chen, who seemed to exist solely to nod at everything Barbara said. About 12 homeowners showed up, most looking as thrilled to be there as I felt. Next item, Barbara announced, reading from her printed agenda. Garage storage violations. We have several properties that are not in compliance with our aesthetic standards. I raised my hand. Barbara, I got a notice about my garage mats. Can you explain what specific rule they violate? She looked at me over her reading glasses, the kind that make people look like they are constantly judging you. Mr. Fredrickson, the HOA board has discretion to determine what constitutes visual pollution. Your garage mats are unsightly and detract from property values. They're floor mats, I said, trying to keep my voice level. They are literally on the floor of my garage. You can barely see them from the street. The rules clearly state that garages must be kept in pristine condition, she replied. No, they do not. I have read the entire covenant document. Section 7.3 specifically lists prohibited items, and floor mats are not among them. A few other homeowners shifted in their seats. I could tell this was not the first time Barbara had played fast and loose with the rules. Greg actually looked up from his phone, which I took as a sign of support. Barbara's face tightened. The board will take your concerns under advisement. Moving on to landscaping issues. I left that meeting frustrated but hopeful that common sense would prevail. I was an idiot. 2 days later, I came home from work to find another letter in my mailbox. This one informed me that I had 72 hours to remove the offensive items from my garage or face a $50 daily fine. I called the management company that handled HOA communications, but they just told me they were following the board's directives. That weekend, I was inside my house working on a client project when I heard a car pull into my driveway. I glanced out the window and saw Barbara's white Lexus. She got out, looked around like she was on a reconnaissance mission, and walked up to my garage. I watched, confused, as she tried the garage door handle. It was unlocked because I had been taking out trash earlier. She opened the door, stepped inside, and I lost sight of her. What the hell was she doing in my garage? I ran to the interior door that connected my house to the garage and opened it just as Barbara was walking out with my traction mats rolled under her arm. "What are you doing?" I called out. She jumped, nearly dropping the mats. "Mr. Fredrickson, I am confiscating these items as HOA president. Since you refused to comply with the violation notice, the board has authorized me to remove the offending materials." "That is theft," I said, walking toward her. "Put those back. This is HOA property enforcement. You signed the covenants when you purchased your home, which gives the board certain rights. No covenant gives you the right to enter my property and take my belongings. That is literally the definition of theft." Barbara clutched the mats tighter. "I will be documenting these items and storing them until you pay the appropriate fines. You can retrieve them once you are in compliance." "In compliance with what? A rule that does not exist." She turned and walked quickly to her SUV, popped the trunk, and tossed my mats inside. I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Barbara, I am documenting that you just took my property without permission. That is theft." She slammed her trunk shut. "Record whatever you want. The HOA has legal authority over this community. Not to commit crimes, it does not." She got in her Lexus and drove off, leaving me standing in my driveway holding my phone. My hands were shaking with anger. I went back inside and immediately started researching Arizona theft laws. What I found made me smile for the first time in days. In Arizona, theft of property valued between $1,000 and less than $2,000 is a Class 6 felony, but more importantly for my situation, theft of property valued between $25 and less than $1,000 is a Class 1 misdemeanor, which is prosecutable. My mats were worth $53. Barbara had just committed larceny. I called the Scottsdale police non-emergency line. The dispatcher was polite but skeptical when I explained the situation. "So your HOA president took your garage mats?" she asked. "Yes, without permission. From my property. That is theft. And you have proof of the value." "I have the receipt, $53. "Okay, we can send an officer to take a report." Officer Mike Jacobson arrived about 45 minutes later. He was in his early 30s, looked tired, and I could tell he was expecting this to be a waste of time. I showed him the video I had recorded, the receipt for the mats, and the violation notices from Barbara. "She really just walked into your garage and took them?" he asked, watching the video again. "Yes, you can see it right there. I verbally told her it was theft. She claimed HOA authority and drove off with my property." Officer Jacobson scratched his head. "I've responded to a lot of HOA disputes, but this is a first. She actually committed theft." "Does she not know that HOA rules do not supersede criminal law?" "Apparently not." "You want to press charges?" "Absolutely." He nodded and started filling out paperwork. "Okay, so this would be theft of property valued between $25 and $1,000. That is a Class 1 misdemeanor in Arizona, punishable by up to 6 months in jail and a $2,500 fine. I will document everything here and we will contact Miss Thompson." What happens next? I will go speak with her, inform her of the complaint, and see if she wants to return the property. If she refuses or admits to taking it with the intent to deprive you permanently, I will issue a citation. Then it goes to court. She told me I could only get them back if I paid fines to the HOA. Officer Jacobson looked up from his paperwork. That is basically extortion on top of theft. This just keeps getting better. He left to drive over to Barbara's house, which was only 3 streets away. I waited anxiously, checking my phone every 30 seconds like a teenager waiting for a text. About an hour later, Officer Jacobson returned and he did not look happy. "Well," I asked. Miss Thompson confirmed she took the mats. She said, and I quote, "The HOA board authorized the confiscation of rule-violating materials, and she does not consider it theft because she did not intend to keep them permanently. But she said I could not have them back without paying fines. That is intent to deprive me of my property." That is what I told her. She insisted she was within her authority as HOA president. I explained that HOA authority does not extend to taking people's belongings, and she got very defensive. She refused to return the items without you paying $250 in fines. $250. The mats cost $53. That is another issue. But for now, I issued her a citation for misdemeanor theft. She was not happy. She threatened to call my supervisor and the mayor. I informed her that neither the police chief nor the mayor can override Arizona criminal code. Did she actually get arrested? No, it is a misdemeanor, so a citation is standard unless someone is an immediate threat or flight risk. She has a court date in 6 weeks. You will be notified because you are the victim. The prosecutor might contact you for a statement. So what about my mats? She still has them. Technically, you could file a separate civil claim for return of property, but the criminal case might resolve that. If she is found guilty, the judge can order restitution and return of property. This was insane. I just wanted my garage mats back, and now Barbara was facing criminal charges. Part of me felt bad, but a larger part of me remembered her smug face when she drove off with my property. The next day, I got an email from the HOA management company. It was a formal notice that my home was being fined $50 per day for non-compliance with garage storage regulations. I replied with a detailed email explaining that Barbara had stolen my property, that the police had issued a citation, and that I would be forwarding any further harassment to my attorney. I did not actually have an attorney yet, but I figured I should probably get one. I called around and found Sandra Reeves, a lawyer in Scottsdale who specialized in HOA disputes and property law. Her initial consultation was free, which was good because I was already out $53 and did not want to spend more if I did not have to. Sandra's office was in a modern building near Old Town Scottsdale. She was in her 40s, sharply dressed, and had the kind of calm confidence that comes from winning a lot of cases. "So let me make sure I understand," she said, reviewing the documents I had brought. "Your HOA president cited you for a violation that does not exist in the covenants, then entered your property without permission and took your belongings, and is now trying to extort fines in exchange for returning them. That is exactly what happened, and she is facing criminal charges." "Yes, she has a court date next month." Sandra leaned back in her chair. "This is one of the clearer cases I have seen. HOAs have a lot of authority, but they cannot commit crimes. I can send a cease and desist letter to the HOA and the management company, demanding they stop all fines related to your garage mats and threatening further legal action if they continue. What about getting my mats back? The criminal case should handle that. If the prosecutor does their job, Part of any plea deal or guilty verdict will include returning your property. If somehow that does not happen, we can file a civil suit for conversion of property, which is the civil equivalent of theft. This is all so ridiculous. They are garage mats. Welcome to HOA law. I have seen people sue each other over the color of mailbox flags. The problem is that HOAs attract people who love petty authority, and sometimes they forget that laws still apply to them. Sandra sent the cease and desist letter the next day. I got an angry call from Barbara the following evening. "You are suing the HOA," she screeched into the phone. "I am not suing anyone yet. My lawyer sent a letter telling you to stop fining me for something that is not a violation. You have made a mockery of this community. Do you know how this looks, having police come to my house, getting a citation? I am trying to maintain property values here. By stealing my property, you do realize you have been charged with a crime, right? An actual crime. I did not steal anything. I confiscated prohibited items." That is not a real thing. You do not have the authority to confiscate anything. That is why you are facing criminal charges. The board will fight this. We have a lawyer too. Good. Maybe your lawyer will explain that HOA rules do not override the criminal code. She hung up on me. I expected that to be the end of it, but I should have known better. The next HOA meeting was apparently an emergency session called to discuss the Kyle Fredrickson situation. I was not officially notified, but a neighbor who was friendly with me, Tom Richardson, texted me about it. He lived 4 houses down and had his own issues with Barbara over the height of his backyard fence. I showed up to the meeting uninvited. The room fell silent when I walked in. Barbara was at her usual spot at the head of the table. Greg and Donna flanked her, and about 20 homeowners filled the other seats. This was the biggest turnout I had seen yet. "This is a closed session," Barbara announced. Actually, according to the bylaws, all HOA meetings must be open to homeowners unless discussing personnel matters or pending litigation. "Which is it?" I had done my homework. Greg cleared his throat. "He is right, Barbara. This is supposed to be open." Barbara's jaw tightened. "Fine, sit down." I took a seat near the back. Tom gave me a subtle nod of support. "As most of you know," Barbara began, "Kyle Fredrickson has made false criminal allegations against me in retaliation for legitimate HOA enforcement actions. This is an attempt to undermine the authority of this board and create chaos in our community." "That is not what happened," I said loudly. "You entered my property without permission, took my belongings, and are now facing criminal charges because what you did is literally theft under Arizona law. You were violating community standards. There is no rule against garage floor mats. I have read the entire covenant document multiple times. Show me where it says that floor mats are prohibited." Barbara shuffled through papers. Section 7.3 gives the board discretion to determine what constitutes visual pollution or violations of community aesthetic standards. No, it does not. Section 7.3 lists specific prohibited items. It says nothing about board discretion for other items. You made that up. Another homeowner, a woman named Patricia who lived on my street, raised her hand. I would actually like to see the specific language Barbara is referencing. I got a violation notice last month about my garden gnomes, and I could not find anything in the rules about them either. Barbara looked flustered. The board has always had enforcement discretion. That is how HOAs function. Within the bounds of the written rules, I said. You cannot just make up new rules and enforce them retroactively, and you definitely cannot commit crimes in the name of enforcement. Greg spoke up, surprising everyone. "Barbara, did you actually take his garage mats from his property? I confiscated prohibited items. Did you have his permission?" I do not need his permission. I am the HOA president. That is not how this works, Greg said, and I could hear frustration in his voice. HOA authority comes from the covenants, not from some unlimited power. If the covenants do not prohibit something, we cannot enforce it, and we definitely cannot take people's property. Are you questioning my leadership? Barbara asked, her voice rising. I am questioning your judgment. Do you realize you are facing criminal charges? This could expose the HOA to civil liability. If Kyle decides to sue, our insurance rates will skyrocket. I was acting in my capacity as HOA president. Any liability falls on the organization, not me personally. That is not true if you committed a crime, Tom called out. Personal criminal conduct is not covered by HOA insurance. The meeting devolved into chaos. Homeowners started talking over each other. Some supported Barbara, claiming HOAs needed strong enforcement. Others thought she had gone too far. A few people who had their own grievances with violation notices started sharing their stories. Barbara tried to regain control by banging a gavel, which I did not even know HOA meetings had. Order. We need order. What we need, said an older man I did not recognize, is a vote of no confidence. Barbara has embarrassed this community and exposed us to legal liability. I move that we hold a special election for HOA president. Seconded, Tom said immediately. Barbara looked like she had been slapped. You cannot do that. My term runs through the end of the year. The bylaws allow for recall elections with a petition signed by 25% of homeowners, Greg said, pulling up documents on his laptop. If we get enough signatures, we can hold a vote. The meeting ended with Barbara storming out, Donna following her like a loyal puppy, and Greg staying behind to talk to concerned homeowners. I approached him after most people had left. Thanks for speaking up, I said. He shrugged. I have been on this board for 3 years. Barbara has gotten progressively worse. She used to be reasonable, but the power went to her head. The garage mat thing was the last straw for me. Do you think the recall will work? If people actually sign the petition, yes, but HOA politics are weird. Some people are afraid to rock the boat even when the boat is sinking. Over the next 2 weeks, Tom and several other homeowners circulated the recall petition. I stayed out of it because I did not want Barbara claiming this was personal retaliation, even though it absolutely was. They ended up getting signatures from 42% of homeowners, well over the required threshold. Meanwhile, the criminal case moved forward. I received a call from the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. A prosecutor named David Klein wanted to meet with me to discuss the charges against Barbara. His office was in downtown Phoenix, about a 30-minute drive from Scottsdale. David was younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, with the overworked look that most public servants have. His desk was buried under case files. Thanks for coming in, he said, gesturing to a chair. I wanted to go over the theft case. I have reviewed Officer Jacobson's report and watched the video you recorded. Pretty clear cut. So what happens now? I will offer Miss Thompson a plea deal. Typically, for a first-time offender on a Class 1 misdemeanor theft charge, we would offer a deal that includes restitution, return of property, community service, and probation. No jail time unless she refuses the deal or has priors. She does not think she did anything wrong. That is what concerns me. I called her attorney yesterday, and they are maintaining that she acted within her authority as HOA president. That is not a defense. If she does not accept a reasonable plea, we will go to trial. How long would that take? Couple months, maybe longer depending on the docket. But honestly, most of these cases settle. Once her attorney explains the reality of the situation, she will probably take the deal. What if she does not? David leaned back in his chair. Then we go to trial, present the evidence, and let a jury decide. The video is pretty damning. She admits on camera to taking your property without permission. Intent to permanently deprive is satisfied by her statement that you could only get the mats back by paying fines. Any halfway competent defense attorney will tell her to take the deal. I felt relieved for the first time in weeks. This nightmare might actually have a resolution. The recall election was scheduled for the following month. Barbara launched a campaign to save her position that could only be described as unhinged. She sent emails to all homeowners claiming that the recall was orchestrated by me as retaliation for legitimate enforcement. She held a meeting at her house with her supporters, about 7 people, where they apparently strategized about fighting back against the anarchy threatening Saguaro Heights. One of her supporters, a guy named Richard who drove a BMW with a personalized plate that said Rich 1, actually came to my door to lecture me about respecting HOA authority. I let him talk for about 30 seconds before closing the door in his face. The recall vote was conducted by mail and ballot to ensure everyone could participate. Results were to be announced at the next regular board meeting. The tension in the community was palpable. People were taking sides like it was a presidential election. Some homeowners even put up signs in their yards supporting or opposing the recall, which was hilarious because Barbara had previously fined people for political signs. The night of the results meeting, the clubhouse was packed. Every seat was filled, and people were standing along the walls. Greg, as the acting secretary, had the ballots counted by an independent third party to ensure legitimacy. Barbara sat at the head of the table, looking confident despite everything. Donna was next to her, whispering support. Greg sat on the other side, deliberately not making eye contact with Barbara. "We will now announce the results of the recall election," Greg said, reading from a paper the vote counter had given him. "Total eligible voters, 217. Total ballots received, 189. For recall, 142. Against recall, 47. The recall passes with 75% support." The room erupted. Some people cheered. Others gasped. Barbara sat frozen, her face going through several shades of red. "This is invalid," she said, standing up. "The process was flawed. I demand a recount." "The ballots were independently counted and verified," Greg said. "The results stand. Effective immediately, you are removed as HOA president. We will hold nominations for a new president at the next meeting." "You cannot do this to me. I built this community. I maintained our standards when everyone else wanted to let things fall apart." "You committed a crime, Barbara," Tom called out. "You stole from a homeowner. You brought this on yourself." She grabbed her purse and stormed out, Donna scrambling behind her. The meeting continued without her, with Greg taking over as temporary president. They immediately suspended all fines related to my garage mats and announced a full review of recent violation notices to ensure they were based on actual covenant rules. I felt vindicated, but the criminal case was still pending. A week later, I got a call from David Klein. "Barbara Thompson accepted the plea deal," he said. "She pleaded guilty to misdemeanor theft. Sentence includes 50 hours of community service, 1 year probation, a $500 fine, and she has to return your property and pay restitution for any damages." "What about jail time?" "None, assuming she complies with the terms of probation. If she violates it, the judge can revoke and sentence her to the maximum 6 months. But for a first offense, this is standard. When do I get my mats back? She has to return them within 7 days. If she does not, let me know, and I will file a motion for contempt." The judge was not sympathetic to her arguments about HOA authority. He basically told her that being an HOA president does not put her above the law. 3 days later, Barbara's husband, a quiet man named Dennis who I had only seen a handful of times, knocked on my door. He looked exhausted and embarrassed. "I have your mats," he said, holding them out. "I am sorry about all of this. Barbara got carried away." "Thanks," I said, taking the mats. They looked fine, no damage. For what it is worth, I told her this was a bad idea from the start. She did not listen. She never does. "Is she okay?" Dennis laughed bitterly. "She is humiliated, lost her position, has a criminal record now, and is doing community service at a homeless shelter." I think reality is finally setting in. I did not want it to go this far. I just wanted her to leave me alone about my garage mats. I know. But maybe this will teach her that you cannot just do whatever you want because you are in charge. Anyway, here is a check for $200. Her lawyer said it was for restitution and to cover any costs you incurred. I took the check, surprised. I was not expecting this much. Legal fees, your time, stress. Barbara is hoping you will not sue her civilly. Her lawyer was pretty clear that you would have a strong case. "I am not going to sue her. I just want to move on." Dennis nodded, relieved. "Thank you. Really. Maybe we can all put this behind us now." After he left, I put the traction mats back in my garage where they belonged. They looked exactly the same as before, just humble black rubber mats with a diamond plate pattern. It was absurd that these ordinary objects had caused such chaos. The HOA held elections the following month. Greg was elected president with overwhelming support. His first act was to establish an appeals process for violation notices and to clarify the covenant language to prevent future disputes about board authority. He also instituted a rule that no HOA board member could enter private property without explicit permission and proper notice, except in genuine emergencies. I saw Barbara around the neighborhood occasionally over the next few months. She never made eye contact. Dennis always waved, looking perpetually apologetic. According to neighborhood gossip, which I tried to avoid but sometimes heard anyway, Barbara had become something of a recluse. She resigned from all her other community activities and was apparently in therapy. Part of me felt bad for her. But another part remembered how smug she looked driving away with my property. How she tried to use her position to bully me into compliance with rules that did not exist. How she genuinely believed that being HOA president put her above the law. The local news picked up the story about 6 months after everything settled. A reporter from a Phoenix TV station called me asking for an interview. Apparently, someone had tipped them off about the crazy HOA president who got criminal charges for stealing garage mats. I declined the interview, but Tom and several other homeowners talked to them. The story aired during Sweeps Week with the headline HOA Horror Stories, when community leaders break the law. They interviewed legal experts who explained that HOAs have limited authority defined by their covenant documents and state law, and that criminal laws always supersede HOA rules. The story included Barbara's case as an example of an HOA president overstepping boundaries. Barbara's attorney later tried to get the news stations to take down the stories, claiming they violated her privacy. But since it was a matter of public record and newsworthy, they refused. The story got shared online and became a minor viral sensation in the weird world of HOA horror stories. I got messages from people all over the country sharing their own HOA nightmares. Some were funny, like the guy whose HOA tried to fine him for a yard gnome they claimed was offensive, even though the gnome was just holding a flower. Others were genuinely disturbing, like the elderly woman whose HOA foreclosed on her house over a few $100s in unpaid fines she did not know about. The attention made me realize how common HOA abuse actually is. These organizations have enormous power over where people live, and sometimes that power attracts the wrong people. Barbara was not evil. She was just someone who got drunk on petty authority and forgot that other people had rights too. A year after the incident, things in Sagaro Heights had settled into a new normal. Greg was doing a good job as president, focusing on actual issues like road maintenance and community events rather than petty enforcement. The neighborhood felt more relaxed. People were not constantly worried about violation notices for trivial things. I kept my traction mats in my garage, where they remained visible through my garage door whenever it was open. They were battle scars, evidence of a ridiculous fight I never wanted but ultimately won. Sometimes neighbors would walk by and comment on them, usually with a laugh about the infamous garage mat incident. Barbara and Dennis moved away about 18 months after everything happened. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that they bought a house in a non-HOA community in Cave Creek. Dennis apparently insisted on it after what they went through. The house sold quickly, probably because everyone in Sagaro Heights knew the story and was curious about the infamous former HOA president's place. I ran into Donna, Barbara's former supporter, at a grocery store a few months after they moved. She looked different, more relaxed, like a weight had been lifted. "Hi, Kyle," she said, seeming nervous. "Hey, Donna. How are you doing?" "Good. Better, actually." I wanted to apologize for supporting Barbara through all that. I was wrong. She was wrong. I just got caught up in the whole thing. It is okay. We all make mistakes. I learned a lot from what happened. About power, authority, and how easy it is to justify bad behavior when you think you are doing the right thing. I am glad you stood up to her. We chatted for a few more minutes before going our separate ways. It was a small moment, but it felt significant. Like the whole mess had actually taught people something. The legal bills ended up costing me about $800 total, which was more than the mats were worth. But Sandra had done good work. The cease and desist letter alone probably saved me thousands in illegitimate HOA fines. I considered it money well spent, and the restitution check from Barbara covered part of it anyway. Looking back, the whole situation was surreal. I moved to Sagaro Heights looking for a quiet place to live and work remotely. Instead, I got embroiled in a legal battle over garage mats that resulted in criminal charges, an HOA recall election, and a minor viral news story. It was exhausting and stressful, but it also taught me important lessons about standing up for yourself and not backing down when someone abuses their authority. The traction mats are still in my garage. They are worn now from regular use, the diamond plate pattern slightly faded from years of Arizona heat and monsoon mud. But they are mine. I paid for them. And nobody has the right to take them just because they do not like how they look. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I had not pushed back. Would Barbara still be HOA president, terrorizing homeowners with made-up violations? Would I have paid thousands of dollars in fines for something that was not actually against the rules? Would other people have suffered under her increasingly arbitrary enforcement? The criminal charges were extreme, but they were also necessary. Barbara genuinely believed that being HOA president gave her the right to enter people's property and take their belongings. She needed to learn that was wrong, and apparently the only way that lesson would stick was through the legal system. I still live in Sagaro Heights. Despite everything, it is a nice community. The location is convenient. The neighbors are mostly friendly now that Barbara is gone, and Greg has done a good job keeping the HOA focused on legitimate concerns. My property values have actually increased, despite Barbara's fears that my garage mats would destroy the neighborhood aesthetic. Every time I pull into my garage and see those mats, I remember the whole ridiculous saga. It makes me shake my head and laugh now, though it was not funny at the time. $53 worth of rubber garage mats caused a year-long legal battle that ended with criminal charges, an HOA recall, and a news story that went viral. The whole experience made me appreciate the importance of documentation. If I had not kept the receipt for those mats, if I had not recorded video of Barbara taking them, if I had not researched Arizona theft laws and found out that theft over $25 is prosecutable, things might have turned out very differently. Knowledge and evidence were my best weapons against someone who thought their position gave them unlimited authority. Friends who live in HOA communities sometimes ask me for advice now. I always tell them the same thing. Read your covenants thoroughly, document everything, and do not be afraid to push back when the HOA overreaches. Most HOA disputes are not worth fighting, but when you are clearly right and the HOA is clearly wrong, you have to stand your ground. Bullies rely on people backing down. When you do not, they often collapse quickly. The legal precedent from Barbara's case actually helped other people too. Sandra told me she has used it as an example in 3 other HOA dispute cases. The fact that an HOA president was criminally convicted for taking property without permission has made some HOAs reconsider their enforcement tactics. It is a small impact, but it is something. I eventually became friends with Tom and several other neighbors who supported me during the recall. We have barbecues occasionally, and the garage mat story always comes up. It has become a legendary tale in Saguaro Heights, passed down to new residents as a cautionary example of HOA overreach. The new people who bought Barbara and Dennis's house are a young couple from California. They have no idea about the history when they first moved in, but neighbors quickly filled them in. They laughed at the story and immediately checked our covenants to make sure there was nothing weird about their garage setup. Last I heard, they keep their mountain bikes in there, visible through the door, and nobody has said a word about it. Greg served 2 terms as HOA president before stepping down, having successfully reformed our community governance. His successor is a retired accountant named Linda, who approaches the role with pragmatic professionalism rather than authoritarian zeal. Violation notices are rare now and only issued for actual covenant violations, not imaginary aesthetic offenses. The whole experience fundamentally changed how I think about authority and rules. Just because someone is in charge does not mean they are right. Just because a rule is written down does not mean it is legitimate or legally enforceable. And just because everyone else is going along with something does not mean you should too. My garage mats are probably the most expensive $53 purchase I have ever made when you factor in all the time, stress, and legal fees involved. But they are also the most valuable in terms of what they taught me about standing up for myself and not letting people abuse their power. Barbara probably never thought her actions would lead to criminal charges. She probably genuinely believed that being HOA president gave her special authority that superseded normal property rights. She was wrong, and she paid the price for that mistake. I do not take any pleasure in what happened to her, but I also do not regret defending myself and my property. The last I heard about Barbara, she was working part-time at a garden center in Cave Creek and keeping a low profile. Her criminal record is public, so potential employers can see the theft conviction, which has apparently made finding work difficult. Dennis is still with her, though rumor has it they went through a rough patch after everything happened. I sometimes wonder if Barbara ever thinks about those garage mats and whether it was worth it. Did she really believe $53 worth of rubber mats were destroying property values? Or was it about control, about making sure everyone knew she was in charge and could make them comply with her vision of what the neighborhood should look like? Whatever her motivations were, the outcome was clear. She committed a crime, got caught, and faced the consequences. The legal system worked exactly as it should. She was given a fair trial, accepted a reasonable plea deal, and completed her sentence. The community moved on with better leadership. Justice was served, both in the legal sense and in the broader sense of accountability. My traction mats are still doing their job, catching dirt and moisture from my shoes and keeping my garage floor clean. They are just mats. They have no aesthetic value. They are not beautiful or interesting, but they are mine, and that was always the point. The whole saga reinforced my belief that property rights matter, that laws exist to protect people from arbitrary authority, and that sometimes you have to fight for principle even when it would be easier to back down. Those are lessons worth learning, even if the tuition came in the form of stress, legal fees, and months of neighborhood drama. I keep the receipt for those mats in a frame on my office wall now, next to a printed screenshot from the news story. It is a conversation piece when people visit. They always ask about it, and I always tell the full story. Their reactions range from disbelief to laughter to anger on my behalf. But everyone agrees that Barbara was wrong and that I was right to stand my ground. The frame also contains a copy of the plea agreement where Barbara admitted guilt. Sandra suggested I keep it as documentation in case Barbara ever tried to cause problems again. She has not, but having that paper makes me feel secure. It is proof that I was vindicated, that the system agreed with me, that I was not crazy for thinking what she did was wrong. Life in Saguaro Heights is quiet now. My garage mats remain undisturbed. The HOA focuses on actual community needs rather than petty enforcement. Neighbors are friendly. Property values are fine. Everything Barbara claimed to be protecting by stealing my mats has flourished in her absence. I learned that sometimes the small battles matter most. Standing up for $53 worth of garage mats was not really about the mats. It was about refusing to let someone abuse their authority and violate my rights. It was about establishing that laws matter more than titles, that being HOA president does not make you a dictator, and that ordinary people can fight back against institutional overreach and win. The story has a clean ending, which is rare for real life. The bad actor faced consequences. The community reformed itself. Justice prevailed. I got my property back. The legal system worked. It is the kind of resolution that feels almost too neat, except it all actually happened. My $53 traction mats taught me that every right worth having is worth defending, that documentation is crucial, that knowledge is power, and that standing up to bullies is hard but necessary. They taught me about Arizona criminal law, HOA governance structures, and the importance of community solidarity. They taught me that ordinary objects can become symbols of larger principles. They are still just rubber mats with a diamond plate pattern, but they represent something bigger now. They represent the idea that your home is your castle, that your property rights matter, and that nobody, no matter what title they hold, has the right to take what is yours. That is a lesson worth any amount of stress, legal fees, or neighborhood drama. That is a lesson I will never forget. And that is why those mats will stay in my garage, visible through the door, for as long as I live in Saguaro Heights.